I buy it in big 20, but buy this gray paper, this charcoal paper, pastel paper in big 22 by 30-inch sheets. So you can tear them into quarters, and each sheet is probably about about $2, $2.30 or whatever. Sometimes you can get them in packs of 10 and get a little bit of a deal. I usually buy it from either Dick Blick or Jerry's Artorama. And I like the charcoal gray. It comes in every color of the rainbow. And when you get this paper, it's a good idea to double check and see. Sometimes it's hard on the darker colors to see which side is the smoother side. I prefer working on the smoother side. And if you're not sure, you can do a little rubbing and see which side is coarse, has a coarser look to it. I think I've got the right side up. I just prefer to work on the more smooth side because I like a really smooth look to my drawings. All right, so if you start with a white, now so this is also relevant to the chiaroscuro assignment in the 102 class if you haven't taken that yet, or if you're in that class, or if you're it's the same kind of a idea, is just working with the values of light and dark. So I'll start a drawing like this with white charcoal because the white charcoal will come off easier than just going to do this real quick and see. Yeah, that's definitely the rougher side. Okay. The white charcoal will come off easier than the black. So you want to work with the white first so to lay in your sketch so that it's easier to get rid of your construction lines, basically, is what we want to do. So since she looks like a child, because believe it or not, our eyes don't grow as much as other parts of the body when so small animals seem to have much larger eyes because the eyes don't grow quite as much as the I'm recording. About half an hour. Okay. And while I'm drawing the portrait, I'm always thinking about the skull underneath because that's what I do. I always think about the bone structure underneath. So remember what I talk about a lot with skull chopping. You can't really see the back of her head that well because it's mostly, here's the front of her face. I'll put a demarcation line for the middle of her face. But yet, I would say that this is still, her face part is still only like 25 to 30% of her overall face. But her eyes seem really big, and it may be partly of a camera distortion. It may be partly that she's young. It may be even some photographic on-purpose distortion. But the features still have good form and good lighting, which is something you always want to look for, which is why another good reason to take your own photos or to have a live model so that you can control every element of the process of creation as possible. So top of her head, even though she's got fluffy hair, I'm going to guess her skull is about there. The bottom of her chin is right there, which is going to give me her eyes right in the center of her head like so. So you can see the top of her skull would be following this line here. Her skull's going to be right about there. Chin obviously there, and eyes come right at the center. So there's a few proportional things that are almost always true with few exceptions, and the exceptions would be the individuality that you can develop with every portrait that you do. But generally the ears, here if we bring up the jawline, comes up like so. The ears always come off the jawline, and they're almost always between either the eyebrows, which our eyebrows are right about here, or the eyes. The ears will be between the eyes and the bottom of the nose, approximately. So a lot of times, and her ears are going way past what seems to be the back of her head. So I'm going to make those adjustments. I don't want to be really careful not to cut off too much of the back of her head because we don't want to do the skull chopping thing. But seeing as this is a child and she's got pretty fluffy hair, I'm going to guess that the back of her skull is right about here. So it's still pretty big cranium. And she could, maybe her face is turning a little more towards us than what I've got. Okay. Now the neck actually starts at the base of the ears. It doesn't start under the chin, but it starts at the base of the ears. I will tend to find where things like emerge from behind as they overlap. I think a lot about overlapping when I'm drawing anything that's a three-dimensional object. So it's like her neck emerges from the middle of her chin. You see how the bottom of her chin is this little squarish thing? You think about the skull. If you think about the jawline of the skull from the front, you'll tend to get a squared off thing at the bottom of the jaw. Looking from the front, it will protrude a little bit, and then the jawline will go up like this, and then the skull. There's a hinge joint here, and then it comes down, and there's the teeth, right? And then there's a kind of a gap here. And then you have the zygomatic arch, which is the cheekbone, which defines the top part of the skull, and the upper mandible that comes down. So I know there's going to be a little hollow area here, which we can kind of see. We have to be careful because makeup can be very deceptive too. So put her angle of her ears like this. All right, so the nose emerges from the face as a sculptural, like a sculptural object. Now here's an interesting point to make. You see this light, you'd think that this would be the darkest part because it's the crevice, or it's the deep part of the nostril. But she's got a very smooth face, and the light, the way the light is coming, hitting her eye right here, it's actually reflecting off the change of plane as the skin of the nose goes like this. The light is hitting and shining off of that flat area, even though it's deep. So, like when I was drawing the horse, and we were getting a lot of these really shiny spots that were, even though they were crevices, they reflected because of the angle of the surface. So a lot of it has to do with the angle of the surface. All right. Forehead and the brow ridge, and then the eye is in front of the brow ridge, and then the cheek comes from behind the eye. And if you study the muscles of the face, you'll know that there's a lot, well, the face is really complicated, but there's muscles that come this way, muscles that come this way. There's a muscle around the mouth, so often you'll get a slight overlap of the muscle around the mouth. And I have a really great book on drawing faces that kind of describes the poochiness around the mouth is like being a donut. She looks kind of underweight in a way, so we're not seeing quite a pooch here, but you can see how the top lip does overlap the bottom lip in the corners of the mouth, and the upper eyelid overlaps the bottom eyelid in the corners of the eyes. And her nostrils are pretty flat, but you can see on this side that curve of the nostril does come down, around, and goes inside. So we're going to do that on this side too. And you can almost imagine two little hard points on the ends of her nose right on either side of that. But we're also seeing some good shadow, some good core shadows, some reflected light. We're getting that deep crevice of the fulcrum. The angle, see the color of her lips really isn't that much different than her skin, only slightly different, and it's a slightly different texture. There's definitely not a line around her mouth, and there's not a line around her nose, and there's not a line around her eyes. In fact, we can't really see very well. It's not a very strong delineation between the white of her eye and the edge of her eyelid there. It's just a slight variation in value for the most part. And you can see the thickness of her lower lid right there. And you can see the thickness of her eyelids on this side as well. So we're looking for all these little clues, kind of give us an idea of shape of things. A little turned up nose. And see how deep her eyes are on her eye, on the surface of the front of her face. The corner of the eye is almost hidden behind the bridge of the nose on the far side, and it's quite a distance back on this side. That's a couple places that I always find people have a hard time getting the positioning and the relationships between the pieces. You can draw one piece perfectly, but if it's not in a good relation to the next piece, then you'll lose the likeness. So I'm already having a problem with the likeness in a lot of ways. I'm not super happy with it, but we'll fix it. I'm going to put a little bit of the hair shape just to, she's got crazy hair. Okay. All right, so since I've used the white, that kind of screws up the values a little bit, but I use the white as the sketching tool so that I can pull it off easily. Now I'm going to start laying in a little bit of the shadow. And I like to think of shadows as shapes, as they tend to be fairly abstract shapes. And if you can find the abstract shapes on a form, chances are you'll draw it much more accurately than if you're thinking about it being a certain part and try to name that part, and then you start drawing the symbolic representation of the part instead of what you're actually seeing. Happiness is a sharp pencil. So you see how the white charcoal just kind of fades away, just falls right off as I'm using the black on top of it. So it makes it a nice initial sketching tool that doesn't do much damage to the surface of the paper itself. So even though her upper lip is so large, we're still following the halfway for the eyes, halfway for the nose, and about a third of the way down for the opening of her mouth. So you can see her teeth, but they're very shadowed. So you want to make sure that you downplay that. Another thing you can look for is there's certain things that line up. The inner corners of the eyes will line up with the place that the nose attaches to the face. And the pupils are supposed to line up with the corner of the mouth, but her mouth is so pouty that it's not lining up. So there's always exceptions to the rule. And you can see how her upper lip overlaps on that far side. And the shadow of the lip on that side, curve of the shadow around the bottom of the lip on this side. And then there's a shadow under the lip right there. And that shadow goes around the chin. See how shadowed the eye gets as it turns away from the light. And you can see the way it forms out, like it does on this side. It forms out on this side too, under her eyebrow ridge. I find that one of the biggest challenges is making the eyes look in the same place so that they don't look cross-eyed and they don't look wall-eyed. That's always a challenge. This pencil's too short. So you can see, I think, hopefully you can see that I'm kind of working over the whole thing before committing strongly to any one part. She still looks older than I want her to look, but I'm trying to figure out where am I missing the proportions, because she's looking too old. So by working over the whole thing pretty as evenly as I can, then I can be more confident that everything is in the right place before I go into so much detail that I can't backtrack or undo what I've done. Her ears are bigger. She doesn't seem like she has big ears, but I guess she really does. And again, looking for like shapes, like here is a negative shape, or here the edge of her hair can be used as a shape to help define proportions. Constantly looking for shapes in their relationships, especially on faces, because we're so hardwired to see faces. And the slightest deviation from the range of normalcy in the proportions of the face will throw off the likeness and the attractive qualities of a face. Okay. Yeah, it's stressful drawing, actually. So you can see that you really don't need to do. I forgot what I was going to say. Never mind. I can't remember. Oh, the teeth. You don't really have to do much to the teeth. They're just sort of very faint. We're not going to do much to that. We don't want them to stick out like buck teeth or anything. The eyes are the window to the soul, as they say. So we can always add emphasis to the eyes without too much worry. She looks a lot angrier in the photograph than she does in my drawing. So another nice thing about working with the gray paper is you can really let the paper do a lot of the work. You don't have to fill in every little square inch. You can let the gray have some precedence. She's got that really cool effect of the dark ring around her irises. It's pretty awesome. Now, I think for her hair, I'm going to use the compressed charcoal because it's going to be much more intense. And I'd like to actually try to put a little bit in the eyes. It's harder to work with it because you can't get a point. But it's a blacker black than what you can get with a pencil. See, even just that little bit of extra charcoal, I think, makes a dramatic difference. Just in the couple little spots it needs a little kick. Yeah. Okay, let's try some of this hair now. So when you're drawing hair, you really can't expect to draw every strand unless you want to spend a lifetime doing it. I've seen artists that do draw every strand, and that's great for them, but not. I don't want to draw every single strand. But you can draw the areas of light and dark like a shape. So you can see that there's some highlights where the curls are curling towards us. And I'm going to just leave those as uncolored for now. Yeah, her hair looks a little bit more spiky in my drawing than it does. It's not as soft. So I might have to go back in with a stump to just kind of soften up the texture of the hair, because I think I made it a little too wiry. To me, her hair looks really soft in the photo. And of course, it's cut off too, which sucks, but yeah. We are going to soften this up a little bit. It's just too harsh. But another really fun thing about working with real materials is you can get in there and just muck around with your charcoal. Finger painting. Got way more hair in my drawing than she does in real life. So I totally overdid it on the hair, but that's okay. That's what kneaded erasers are for. You can pull it back. And then I can also use it to make the highlights, the kneaded eraser. Yeah, I can live with that. So, I think that's about as far as I'm going to take this, for at least for now. I could take it a little darker here. Sometimes it's good to let your drawings sit for a day or so and then come back and look at them again, and you'll see little things that you might have missed the first pass through that need a little push or a little pull, a little highlight or a little more shadow. And that will... It also, interestingly, when I draw these things, I'm looking at the paper, and then when I look up at the camera, it changes. There's a definite difference in the value translation from what I'm seeing on my paper and what I'm seeing on the screen. It's kind of strange. I don't know how to rectify that.
I just sent you a copy of mine.
Okay. All right.
I was not afraid of noses for a little while, but I got afraid of noses again, and I didn't really draw the nose that clear. But
Well, if you remember, the nose is just value. Just try not to make it try not to outline it, but approach it as just a range of values. That's going to be the key. It's more sculptural than linear.
I think I kept her innocence, her childlikeness,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't really define her features that well. That would be my. I'm more of an impressionistic, and I'm using it as an excuse, maybe.
No, that's okay. All right, I'm going to stop the recording. Whoops, let me make it a little darker right here. Sometimes squinting at your source and then squinting at your drawing, you can see the places that you need to push and pull on the actual values. So that's another good trick to keep
Yeah,
in your
saw that.
toolbox.
Yeah, with the nose, I
Yeah.
could have shadowed the back of it a little bit more.
Okay.